you have not yet tried My Pillow from Mike Lindell, you are missing out. I love their products. I opened my box of goodies from mypillow.com on the air one day and got my pillows and my Giza sheets and my super absorbent towels, which, by the way, towels that don't absorb, what is their purpose? They really don't have one. So I'm really grateful that Mike has created towels that are soft and very absorbent, and I love them. I won't use any other towels ever again. So please go out to mypillow.com. And when you're doing that, you're supporting freedom. You are supporting America First patriots who are in the fight to save our country. Use Coach Mel as your coupon code and you will get a discount up to 80%. Go check it out today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday, June 27th on the Coach Mel Show. And I am so honored today. I'm just going to get right into it. We have so much to talk about. I have the honor of a friend of mine who I was had the great privilege of meeting this last year and experiencing one of the most incredible conferences of my lifetime. I think that was probably one of the most surreal things I've ever been to. But I got to meet Marly at a conference we had last August, and she got on stage and she stole the show with the information that she dropped on us from coming out of New York. And I think, we all have the clear message that things went wrong in 2020 and continue to go wrong as far as our elections go. But the way that this lady articulated and will today for you is going to blow your socks off. Please welcome with me, Marly Hornik. And welcome, Marly. We're so glad you're here today.
Thanks, Mel. It's really good to be here. I'm so happy for you. You got your show going. It looks great.
Thank you so much. It's fun. I'm really having a good time. I meeting some great people and then having a good time to try to work on saving the country. So in my little piece, the little piece that I can. But anyway, so I just kind of want to give you the floor because you can explain this so much better than I can. I will fumble it and get it wrong. So will you please just kind of dive in? And I know some of the folks here who are watching are prepped and ready for you and know a little bit, but not what you're about to tell us. So however you want to start this out, I I just give you the floor. Tell us who you are and what you do, and then go for it.
All right, you got it. I am the executive director of New York Citizens Audit, which is an extraordinary team of grassroots patriots in New York State, over 2,000 strong now, that have contributed to this massive research project. In August of 2021, we were all home, told we're not essential. And so we just figured, well, if we're just not that important, we better get a copy of the New York State voter roll database and just poke around because we're not really that smart and we don't really know what's going on and we're not important anyway. So let's just mess around. So we did. We got a copy of the New York State voter roll database using the FOIA process, and we got copies of all the county voter roll databases. And we began a process that at the time, we didn't know how important it was going to be, and we didn't know that it had never been done before. I think we probably naively assumed that this would be a standard procedure in our election systems and our voting systems, is to make sure things are accurate. And as soon as we started looking into those documents, those public records, which the state voter roll database is the official record under federal law for the administration and certification of federal elections. So it's actually a very important document. It's part of our national security infrastructure. And so the process of examining it became fascinating quickly. We had also downloaded one spreadsheet. Everything that we've done is through raw data, except for this one particular spreadsheet we thought to download from the State Board of Elections, which is called the official results of the 2020 general election. So this we're starting out in August of 2021. So our complete focus at that time was to try to figure out, were there any anomalies in the 2020 general election in New York State? So that was the perspective we had heading into this project. So one of the first things we did, like I said, was download this spreadsheet, official results of the 2020 general election. Now, this is an Excel spreadsheet with a list of numbers. There's nothing to document how this list of numbers was generated. We just have to take their word for it. But there's a number in that document that says this is how many votes were cast in New York State in the 2020 general election. So we thought, well, let's just check in the New York State voter roll database, which is called NICE Voter, NYS Voter, ironically, all those nice voters. So we started searching in the voter history field of the database. Now, that database is over 21 million records. So technically, all we were doing was arithmetic, but we were doing arithmetic with high-level software developers because it's really difficult to count 21 million records
Mhm.
accurately. So we discovered immediately a discrepancy of over 272,000 votes to voters. So the number they claimed of
Wow.
votes cast in their official document was 272,000 more than the number of voters who had voted according to the official record. That made us more curious. So
Oh, wow.
that's when we started requesting the county voter roll databases, and we also got a copy of the precinct spreadsheets from 2020. And we started looking at them county by county. And in the end, we discovered that they had certified a federal election with 338,000 more votes cast than voters who voted. Now, they
That's a
like to
lot.
claim that we looked at the wrong record. That's just simply false. If you had $338,000 missing from your bank account, would you give it over as a clerical error or say, well, maybe I just looked in the wrong bank account? I don't think so. You would want that
No,
investigated. That's a
absolutely. And isn't there a
that's a
threshold at which what's the threshold for investigating one of these?
Right. Well, there is an error rate under federal law. There is a specific rate that it says, federal law says the voting system cannot cross this threshold and have the election considered valid without an investigation. And that threshold is 1 in 10 million ballot positions. A ballot position is a single race on a ballot. So let's say your average ballot may have 10 ballot positions. So in New York's 2020 general election, that means they were allowed to have roughly 86 ballots in error. And they
Okay.
crushed
Wow.
it. We found
Wow.
nearly
86
a
versus
million.
336,000? Yeah.
Right. Well,
Sorry.
that's the deficit. Okay. So we don't even know what those ballots were. We don't know who
Oh,
those voters were. But when we look in the voter roll databases and we compare them to the law, for example, just standard eligibility of voters, you have to have an address in New York State and everywhere. And we know this, right? Because when they have these battles over the election district lines, right? The gerrymandering battles, and we have to have this many people and this many Democrats, and they have these bitter, bitter battles in the courts over where you live. That's what that really is about. Who lives where? So your address and actually your apartment number, if you don't own your whole entire building, is a considered an essential part of your registration record. And yet 27,000 people voted in the New York State 2020 general election without an address. So it's an open question how that happened, but that's clearly a violation of your 86 ballots in error margin. And that's just the beginning.
wow.
I could go numbers all day. The problem that we really have identified, though, through New York Citizens Audit and with the help of many brilliant people from across America, and some of them, I have to say, the first time they became introduced to New York Citizens Audit work was at the pit. So I'm
Oh, wow.
continually grateful to Catherine and Greg for giving me that 10-minute
Mm.
window. And I apologized to Catherine. I said, I know you gave me 10 and I took 13. I'm sorry. I had to make sure that I got this one piece in there. And anyway, I um I did I received a lot of help. There were a lot of miracles that came out of that event, and New York Citizens Audit received help, and New York Citizens Audit receiving help means that America received help in this monumental fight for our liberty, to recover and
Wow.
restore and renew the concept and the principle of a democratic republic and liberty under God here in America. And part of that help was
Wow.
about the way that we had been um, structuring our arguments, and one person in particular really helped to clarify for me that the anomalies we had uncovered, they already represented violations of a principle of law that wouldn't require any further investigation. And I didn't know about this. I didn't understand. I didn't have the clarity that I have now at that time. And what I learned is that when someone, you have this, we have this crazy voting system, right? It's like a tangled web. There is so much chaos and so much noise in this system. And there are so many places where one person can point the finger at the other person. And how do you ever get this thing fixed? And everybody knows the machines are a mess, but how do you prove the machines are a mess when they won't give you access to the machines and the courts are upholding that? It's just a giant mess, right? What do you do? And I
Mm.
received this clarity and this help, which is there is one point in this entire chaos that's the Achilles heel. There is one moment in the
Mm.
entire voting system election administration process where somebody has to put pen to paper and swear and attest
Mm.
in their official
Mm.
capacity and in their personal capacity as a living human being that everything looks good, and they certify that election. And when they do
Mm.
that, they are swearing to the people of their state, and in regarding a federal election, they're swearing to the people of the United States of America that everything regarding the administration of that election is accurate, it's provable, and it was unwaveringly faithful to the state and federal laws that govern the administration of elections in that state. And they sign their name that, yes, I
Mm.
checked, I verified every auditable record. I verified the risk assessments. I made sure that every single thing I'm required to do to prove to the American people that the election outcome
Mm.
listed here on this piece of paper is true and accurate. I did it all. I
Mm.
checked it and I'm signing off. This was the very, this I know this election is accurate. And it's simply a lie. If you have 338,000 more votes than voters, you've already
Right.
violated that principle. And I'm not here to say that I have a magic wand to set us back to, January 6th, 2021, or to, I don't have a magic wand.
Right.
That's not what I have to say here. What I do have is I have a magic wand about 2024. And it's not really all that
Nice.
magic. It's the law and it's a lot of hard work. So I can't save everybody from that. We're all going to have to work really hard, but we can do this
Yeah.
because what we've what we've experienced and all of the work that the American people have done in demonstrating that there are serious violations of, let's say, how would we describe them thus far? We would say there's reasons to be extremely concerned in many, many states that there was fraud, and people have been working so hard to demonstrate that. But there's one
Mhm.
last piece that the vast majority of all these amazing election integrity teams across America haven't done, which is to check the law. And this was what
Mm.
I was instructed and guided to do after the pit. And boy, was that a really good idea. I can't tell you. And I was sitting there going, oh my God, I don't know how to read the law. I'm not an attorney. Oh, New York State election law is over 800 pages. What do you mean I'm going to read this?
Wow.
And I was intimidated and it looked like this Mount Everest. I didn't have to read the entirety of New York State election law. I had to find two laws. The first law
Mm.
says that it's section it's it's actually the New York State Codes, Rules, and Regulations. See, now I know exactly. It's Title 9, Executive Branch, Elections
Wow.
62785E. Nice voter shall assign a unique statewide identifier that stays with that voter for their voting life. I don't know how many words that is. What was it, 12 words?
Mm.
That will save New York, and they may save America. Because when the New York
Wow.
State Board of Elections says to me, oh, this isn't all these 1.25 million excess state registration numbers that have been assigned to people who already had one is just it's an artifact of the DMV sending extra registrations over. If I hadn't read that law,
There's how many more than actual people? Say that again?
we discovered 1.1 million unique individuals in the NICE voter database, the NYS voter database, who have been assigned 2.4 million state Board of Elections ID numbers, which means there's 1.25 million extra registration records in the database that can be used to cast votes, but they can't be used by the voter. They're floating around in the database, and if you have administrative access, you could assign a second vote. And we have seen registrations from unique individuals who have cast more than one vote in 2020 and in 2022. So the assertion from the State Board of Elections that that's not a big deal is simply untrue. Um, and
Wow.
again, if it happened 2,600 times in the 2020 general election, now one school would say that's not material because that's not enough votes to change the outcome of any election. However, it's demonstrable fraud. If you are in finance, let's say you have a big corporation and you're going to turn in your SEC quarterly filing, right? And you're going to turn that in and they're going to open that up. And if there is some error in your document, if it's less than 5% error and it's honest to goodness error, it's not considered material and it doesn't need to be investigated. If it's more than 10% error, it's got to be investigated because that's just too much error. It has to be, you have to make sure that everything, the processes that are mandated are actually being followed and that the error isn't coming out of something that's broken in the system. But if there is one penny in your SEC filing that is provable fraud, they are going to tear your books open because nobody cheats for one penny. That's the
Wow.
part they couldn't cover up. So if there are 2,600 double votes registered and recorded in the NYS voter database, which again is part of our critical national security infrastructure, that should be
Mhm.
like a 20 alarm fire telling the
Right.
officials, how did this happen? Before we can say this isn't material, we
Right.
have to find out how this happened. In an honest system, that's how the administrators of that system would respond. They would want to know,
Mm.
how did this happen? Because they want to make sure that it didn't affect anything else in the fine. If it's 2,600 votes in a 1.9 million vote margin of victory, and they can show and demonstrate that it didn't affect any down ballot races, fine. But it's
Mm.
still in
Right.
excess of that magic error rate that they had to deal with in ballots. Now,
Hmm.
the the issue of certification gets further complicated in New York. First of all,
Yeah.
what's clear and simple is when they can't prove that an election is accurate, they can't certify it. Why is that? Let's explore why is that so critical that they are unwaveringly faithful to the law. So what is the law? Here's our precious jewel, right? Here's our voting system for America. And it is just like any precious jewel, right? If you had a precious jewel, if you had the Pink Panther, if you ever watched that, fun movie, it's surrounded by laser beams and slamming doors, and there's security guards everywhere, right? And it's a mockery. But anyway, that's how things that are very, very precious are protected. You have a superb security system because let's be real, right? People steal stuff. So you have this voting system, and the voting system is so critical because in America, our founders were geniuses, and they knew that people who have access to great power will be tempted. They're going to face monumental challenges at times of their integrity, their personal integrity. They're going to be
Mhm.
tempted to take advantage of a system for their own benefit or for the benefit of people that they would like to please for whatever reason. And so they decided, well, we can't have a king in America, but somebody has to sit on the throne of a nation. And so they put the law on the throne. Thomas Paine said it perfectly in Common Sense. He said, in America, the law is king. So
Yep.
everybody is below the law. Now, how is the law managed? Who is in charge of the king in America? Well, the people want to live, and the
We are.
founders knew this. We want to live under laws that we agree with. We don't want tyrannical circumstances. We want to live free.
Right.
We want to have freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom in our education for our children. All of these things, that's our determination. That's our personal journey on this most extraordinary, incredible life walk, right? And so they
Yeah.
said, we're going to, if everyone in America is in charge of the law, it's going to get chaotic, right? That's too many people. You can't have that many cooks. So they said, we're going to have free and fair elections, and we're going to choose those representatives who are allowed to write and enforce law in our country. And we're going to be very careful about who those people are, and we're going to give them really short leashes. We're not going to give them a lot of time just in case they go a little bit rogue. We want to be able to get them out of there quickly. So the
Yeah.
election system is so precious because that's the link between the people and those who are allowed give granted that authority for a 2 to 6 year period to write and enforce our laws. So here we go. We have our precious jewel,
Mhm.
and actually the way that the laws are constructed, and this is thanks to Democrats. I just want to say thanks to people like Amy Klobuchar, I don't know how to say her name, and Bernie Sanders on the Democrat side who knew, boy, Democrats rig elections too. Like everybody rigs elections. Let's make that really hard to do because this was post hanging Chads, and boy, were they still mad. They wrote and passed the Help America Vote Act. So for the first time in America, we now have this amazing interwoven tapestry of laws and audit records that are mandated. So every time
Mm.
a piece of information passes through that tapestry and reaches that beautiful gem in the middle, there's a record is
Mm.
created. If it passes in or out of the system, whether it's a paper record or an
Wow.
electronic record, it doesn't matter. The entire process is auditable because the Democrats were so mad. That's also why we have an error rate. There was never an error rate for federal elections until 2002 when they passed the Help America Vote Act. So, how did you know if the election was accurate enough? Now, technically, if you go to Webster's and you look up the word accurate, it says free from error, right? So that's what
Wow.
accurate
Yeah.
means.
Of course.
And our voter rolls under the law have to be accurate. However, anyway, the point is that when that tapestry is not intact, when there are provable breaches of that tapestry, our national security infrastructure is breached. And that
Mhm.
requires an investigation. So if that magic,
Wow.
80 it was 86 in New York, 86 ballots in error. When that's breached, our national security infrastructure is considered breached. And thank goodness, because it is. Like it should be that stringent. And
Yeah.
so let's talk about really the numbers that we've fully uncovered, because again, I talked about the 27,000 people with no address, and you know, that's wrong. Don't get me, don't take me the wrong way. That is wrong. But looking at all the different categories of illegal and invalid registration in the NICE voter database, we discovered nearly 995,000 votes assigned to registration records that are either illegal or clearly invalid according to registration law. They're missing their address. The registration date is in the future. The registration date is before the person was born. The person is purged with no purge date. These are the kind of illogical circumstances that we uncovered in the tens of thousands and sometimes the millions. We have 1.5 million people in the New York State voter roll database who are purged with no purge date. And I'll tell you, almost 1 million of them were never active in the voter roll database. And we know that because, our data guys are super geniuses, and they run these graphs and they demonstrate that these almost 1 million people who are purged in the state voter roll database in New York don't correlate to a registration that was ever active. So answer me
Wow.
this, oh election gods. How? How is it that almost 1 million people registered to vote purged? Who the heck does that? So the database is being
Mm.
manipulated. That's the answer to that question. And so basically, what we're looking at here is the first 24 registration records in Queens County, which happens to be one of the more corrupt counties in New York State. And we are looking at a circumstance that is inexplicable if the database hasn't been breached. And what's taken place here is you're looking at the registration records for the first 24 rows as they appear in the New York State voter roll database. And what you'll notice as you're looking at it is, just like Melody said, there's a couple different decks of cards that our voter registration numbers in New York are being dealt from. And this is very, very subtle work, but it's highly important. So if you look at one of the first columns over, you'll see CID at the top. That's the county ID number. The first 5 rows are dealt from a deck of cards that starts with the number 305. And otherwise, they're in consecutive order, or they're in numeric order. They're not quite in consecutive order, but they're in numeric order from smaller to greater. And then right there at row 6, all of a sudden you see this N131 deck. So they threw in an N131, then they went back and they dealt out 9 305s in numeric order, and then an N131. And the N131s are also in numeric order. Now, every 10th row for over 1.1 million rows in this database, they keep dealing out these N131s. That's impossible. Okay, just to say that's impossible to do. No data program sorts records in this fashion naturally. Excel doesn't do it if you've ever worked with Excel, and no database program sorts numbers in this fashion. You sort numeric numbers in order, and then you have alphanumerics after them because they're different. And so you wouldn't interlace them in this way, and you certainly wouldn't have them interlaced in a pattern like this. So already right off the bat, we know that some poor, incompetent individual, because they always throw their employees under the bus. It's so disgusting. They always when you call the Board of Elections out on anything, they just pick up that employee, throw them under the bus. Oh, they're just an idiot. So one of
Mhm.
their idiots probably was sitting at a console for 3.5 years, cutting and pasting an N131 ID number every 10th row into this database for 1.1 million rows and never made an error, right? Either that or they were programmed
Wow,
by
right.
algorithms. That's the other option. It was an algorithm. Okay. So now
Right.
we hop over to the next column, which I think says short ID. So the New York State voter, the state ID number technically starts with an NY and 10 leading zeros. We just cut all that off because it's the same, and we just look at these numbers. Now, these numbers are in perfect consecutive order, as if they're online at that same old ice cream parlor I talked about in August. As if you have 24
Well, okay,
people.
so hold on. So you have strand ID and then block ID and then the short ID. I don't know if you needed the strand ID or the block ID
No, just go to
first.
short ID. Yeah,
Um,
that's all right.
the short ID. And then that does miss. So we go from 193, 194, 196, 197, 199, 200. So there's a couple misses in there.
There's a couple missing, right? But so maybe someone was online for an ice cream cone and they got a phone call and they had to leave. But basically, the point
Oh,
is
gotcha.
they're all there on the same day at the same time. These are mostly consecutive, right? And then you jump over to the next column and it says registration date. All the folks who are from the 305 deck are standing on that line waiting for an ice cream cone on June 14th and June 15th of 2004. But all the people who have an N131 county ID number are standing on the exact same line on the exact same day on January 1st of 1984. How does
Oh
that
my.
happen?
Nope.
So talk about phantom voters, right? They're ghosts standing on an ice cream line. This does not make any sense. And this pattern was what Andrew Paquette, we call him Dr. Zark, he's the person who unwound all of this, and thankfully for America. But
Wow.
the what happened ultimately was that he worked so diligently on this, he proved it, and Catherine and Greg gave us that opportunity to tell the world about it because they knew we had already spoken to the state police about it. We sat down with the Special Investigations Unit of the New York State Police for 4 hours in June of 2022 and showed them this whole system, how it's rigged. And they were stunned. The major sitting in that room and all of his guys, the smartest guys in the New York State Police, they said, "This is treason." And they said, we can't actually do this investigation because we don't have jurisdiction over something this massive. They said,
Wow.
we have
Wow.
to give it to the Foreign Intelligence Task Force of the FBI. That's why Catherine and Greg gave me those 10 minutes because they were like, "Oh, you're in hot water now
Wow.
because the FBI knows you know."
Yeah.
So so he kept working and he kept proving more and more, Dr. Zark. And finally, he wrote a paper about what he had discovered. And he's a PhD, brilliant guy, very, very well educated, very incredible thinker. And he submitted the paper, and now it's history. 3 cyber intelligence experts at the Journal of Information Warfare went over his research with a fine tooth comb and said, "Sure looks like steganography to us," and published it in May of this year in the Journal of Information Warfare. So I'll get it. So basically, it's now a scientific fact that the New York State voter roll
Yeah.
database has been completely corrupted with algorithmic programming that's deeply hidden in the database, controls the assignment and registration ID numbers of every registrant in that database, and in all likelihood is being used to extract information about those registration records.
Right.
Steganography, all that means actually is hiding something in plain sight. So a perfect example of steganography is oh boy, now I'm not going to be able to remember the name. In World War I, the
Uh,
machine that they used to do all the encryption of those messages, and if you didn't have the decoder, uh, you would have to, I'll think of it in a minute. So in steganography, basically, you're looking at encrypted data, but it's not like an encrypted message where you can see that there's a code, you just can't break it. It looks for all the world like it's completely innocent, just normal information that's not hiding anything at all. The Enigma machine, that's what I was trying to think of. They had used
Great.
to code all of those messages, and no one could figure out what the code was because they looked like legitimate messages. Um, that's steganography. So when you
Wow.
have something like that in a database that's part of the national security infrastructure, and it is designed, again, going back to our founding fathers and our founding mothers, I always like to give them credit too. Um, the the foundational principle of America is zero trust. No one has to take another person's word for it. Transparency and accountability is fundamental to the American principle, the American government. So
Yeah.
so if you have hidden information in a database and it's so hidden that the people who are responsible for certifying elections based on the information in that database don't know it's there, Houston, we have a huge problem. That's illegal on its face. So, whether or not you ever understand all the math that Dr. Zark unwound, it doesn't matter. What we know about the New York State voter roll database at this point is it's breached. When you have
Right.
basically this hidden information that's only available to people who have the key to unlock the secondary structure that's hidden there, to unlock the encrypted message, um, you basically you're looking at nefarious behavior. When people hide things, it's
Mhm.
because they want to do bad things. We
Mhm.
have massively manipulated data. We have actually more registration violations in the New York State voter roll database than the entire living population of the state of Wisconsin. So that's not a clerical error, which is that's by the way, that's 5.9 million people.
So one of the things you said last night is there was something about they would you gave an example of there was like a Marly Hornik and a Hornik Marly, but there's no such thing as a Hornik Marly. I know you were just using an example, but these were ways that they were adding and padding the registries, or what? Tell us about that a little
Yes.
bit.
Yes, exactly. There's many categories of these clearly false or fictitious registrants. That's one pattern where you have a transposed name. So I'm registered to vote Marly Hornik, and then for some reason in the database, if you are really good at searching for these things, you can find Hornik Marly. Now, I don't actually have that, but a lot of people do. Tens of
Right.
thousands of people have this. So that demonstrates on its face that the Board of Elections is not verifying or validating the identity of registrants. They're simply allowing everyone to register because there is no Hornik Marly, as you say. So, how did that person's identity get validated before they were added to the voter roll database and given a unique State Board of Elections ID number that can carry votes? So
Right.
yes, that's one category. There's maiden, married clones. There's a lot of clerical error clones, which are not allowed according to the law. I won't go into the weeds on that one, but in New York State, there's a law that they have to check for clerical errors during the validation process.
Wow.
So they just can't have it.
Wow.
But um, you
Amazing.
know, the fact that all of this data is being manipulated, like how did that happen? And again, just using me as an example, but this is a very common clerical error. How would a Hornick Marley get added to the database? That's a really good question because clearly the law is being ignored when that is happening. And the database is running itself. Actually, that's one of the most terrifying things about this data breach. That this the send the what the heck are they called? The Cyber Intelligence Information Security Agency, CISA. The ones who said this is the
Okay.
most secure election in American history. Their own
Mm.
standards show that when there is steganography in a voter roll database, or in any database for that matter, it's called a total loss of control data breach. That means the
Oh,
people who believe they're administering the database are not. The steering wheel is somewhere
Mm.
else, but they don't even know that. They have no idea where it is. They don't realize it's not in their office at their desk when they sign in with their
Hmm.
credentials. It's possible that someone in the Board of Elections does know that, but I don't know who they are. When you have a total
Right.
loss of control data breach, the data is unrecoverable, right?
Mhm.
You cannot use that data anymore, for example, to administer and certify a federal election, not even the 2024 presidential election that's coming up.
You made a statement last night. Someone kind of pushed back on you a little bit, and understandably, not everybody's as educated about this as you are. But well, I believe that this person, clearly won because this was, had they fixed it, this person would have won. And what said you to that comment?
Oh, I say to all comments like that, I have no idea who won. The problem is,
Mm.
neither does the New York State Board of Elections, and they will never be able to prove it to the people of New York State or to the American people because they certified a provably inaccurate election. And the magnitude of that inaccuracy is absolutely staggering. It's like, the blue whale of inaccuracy. You can never wind it back. That's what it means when they say the database is not recoverable. So if every aspect of the New York State voter roll database is now officially untrustworthy, which validates actually our findings, right? When you have, 100,000 people whose registration date is after their last voted date, when you have 1.5
Mm.
million people who are purged with no purge date, or 1 million people who were never active in the database that are purged, you're looking at a circumstance that is so beyond logic. You can't walk it back. How do you unwind that? And that brings me to another point. It puts our election officials in the position of umpire. And I want to clarify something
Mm.
really critical because conservatives are not sore losers by and large, right? Part of the principle of
Mm.
conservatism is, being willing to accept when you lost, right? It's like, well, we all played the game, we
Right.
all
Right.
played fair, everybody did their best, and we just lost.
Exactly.
But this is not a playoff game. Again, we're
Right.
talking about the chain. This is a sacred thing. It's the chain between the people and those representatives we authorize to write and enforce the laws that sit at the throne in America.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there is no room for error. There can be no
Right.
doubt in any outcome of any election, and our election officials have to prove it to us. And if they're not
Wow.
willing to prove it to us, as we all know, that raises a lot of
Right.
suspicions. That right there on its face is a problem. But they really can't waver from the law. They're simply not allowed the privilege, and here we go, of playing umpire. And they're playing
Right.
umpire all through this process. They're looking at, Hornik, Marly, and Marly Hornik, and they're just making a decision about which one of those is the valid registrant and
Right.
which one is the correct one to assign the vote to. But they don't know because they ignored the law that said they had to verify my identity before they added me, forwards or backwards.
Right. Right.
And you
Right.
and you had
So
that's why
so
the
I
voter rolls have to be accurate. You have a giant mess. They have a massive mess.
right.
They can't prove anything.
Is this happening in other states?
Absolutely. Yes. We've reverse engineered algorithms in the New Jersey voter rolls. So that's already been solved and is on its way for peer review. We are working actively with teams since the pit, actually, because a lot of folks really wanted to try to figure out if we could see this in their voter roll databases. Because I put up those tantalizing slides about Ohio and Texas.
Yep.
And boy, did that
Yes, you did.
draw out the people. And we did. We started working really hard, and we are still working with a team in North Carolina and a team in Ohio and a team in Pennsylvania. And there's
That's
no
awesome.
question. So it makes sense
Yeah.
that they would be everywhere because if you don't What's the problem? The problem is if you want to use mail-in balloting en masse to disenfranchise real voters, to dilute the vote and overwhelm the real vote with a fake vote, you have to be able to reconcile those ballots into the registration database because the law requires that. So just like you have to balance your checkbook, at the end of the day, the election
Mhm.
checkbook has to balance as well, or it's supposed to. And so they have to, if it, let's say in the New York State voter roll database, again, the 21 million records, let's just say, and again, this is not the official number, let's just take a
Right.
stab and say 3 million of them are completely fictitious end to end. So that's like dropping a drop of water into the ocean. How am I going to find that drop of water again when I want to assign a fake
Right.
vote to it? They have to be
Right.
trackable. And that's what this
Yeah.
hidden structure creates. It creates a way to track the registration records that are invalid so that they can be assigned votes quickly as they're trying to balance an election that they are overwhelming with fraud.
Do we have a shot? I think is my question to you. Do we have a any kind of hope to remedy this?
Absolutely. I couldn't be more certain that we are going to have a huge impact on turning the tide. We're standing in, there's no question, it's a giant storm, a giant hurricane, and we're taking the work that the American people have already done for 2.5 years, so much extraordinary effort that has been put into demonstrating fraud. And we're taking that work and we're doing the last step, which is to put it next to the law, right? If you have all of these anomalies you've uncovered, they're just anomalies until you look up the law that they were supposed to have followed
Right.
and you discover you're no longer looking at 10,000 anomalies, you're looking at 10,000 violations of black letter election law. Black letter law just means that you don't have to be an attorney to know what the heck it means. And it makes sense, right? Nice voter shall assign a unique statewide identifier that stays with that voter for their voting life. That's the law.
Period.
It's obvious what it means. You can't have more than one state ID, and there's no legitimate reason for that to ever take place. That's just one little tiny New York
Mm.
law, right? Um, the power of that, we found almost 2 million registration records in the New York State voter roll database that are supposedly people who reside in either the 5 boroughs of New York City, Erie County, or Nassau County. But when we looked in the county databases, we didn't find those people. Now that's a mystery, isn't it? But when you look up the law says the only people in New York State who are allowed to add registration records to the databases are the county commissioners and their staff. Now we're not looking at a mystery, we're looking at 1.9 million violations of black letter election law. You see how beautiful this is?
Wow.
Piece that the American people, we have to get our brains together. I know it's daunting. I'm every Tuesday night at 7, we have a wonderful call now where we're reading federal election law together so everyone can get on board with how this system is supposed to be administered. What is the error rate? Under what basis is that claim being made? Everybody knows where to find it. We're digging in, we're reading all this together. And I unfortunately I can't read 50 states election law. So that's where you have to just like, okay, you just I say this to my daughter, right, when I'm like, "Oh, we have to do the dishes." "Oh, I don't wanna do the dishes." I go like this, smile and get ready because 'cause we're gonna do those dishes. They're gonna get clean, don't worry. It's not gonna take that long, it's not that bad." It's the same thing with reading state election law. So, yes, united sovereign Americans, we're days away from hanging our shingle online. United
Right.
sovereign Americans. Why? Because they wanna make us so into one thing, right? They don't want America to be
Right.
critical thinking individual characters anymore. They want to take away that whole part. You know why? Because it's difficult to manage under a technocracy. If people have a lot of individual
Right.
thoughts and ideas and perspectives and creative solutions, that's that's not
Yeah.
really how the game is played under a technocracy. So, united sovereign
Right.
Americans, we are all sovereign beings. Our nation is sovereign, and we are taking the power back to the people. And we are going to take these cases in every single state where we can prove inaccurate certifications that
Wow.
materially violated federal and state law. We're going to argue that. We're not going to argue it in an election. We're going to adjudicate these voting systems. We're going to ask a judge to say, Judge, we've discovered that our election officials or our Secretary of State certified an election with these inaccuracies. Here's the accuracy rate,
Mm.
and here's how many they certified. Is it true or false in America that election officials have to obey the law? That's the question. And if the judge
Right.
says, you know what, they do have to obey the law, guess what? On November 6th, 2024, if they didn't obey the law, we have standing. That's what this is all about.
Mm.
It's all about on November 6th, 2024, what's your game plan? How are you going to stop them from railroading through another fake presidential election and taking this country to its knees and
Right.
breaking them forever? This is about our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, our great great grandchildren. They're not here yet, but they're coming. What are we going
That's
to
right.
leave for them? So we have to read these laws.
Yeah.
We have to get this smart because no one is going to do this for us. And we're so close. The American people have taken this to like almost to the edge. We're almost ready to jump off the cliff and sprout wings and fix this. It doesn't mean it's going to
Wow.
be
That's
pretty,
awesome.
right? It's not a fantasy,
Yeah.
but it's a miracle.
Right. It is. And you know what I love about this is finding the truth, and this is not kinetic. We're actually able to logically discover with brilliant minds, with brilliant people. You're showing, Marley, what happens when we come together. Like just coming together at the pit was divine. I mean, that was a room of like 200 people. And out of that, the multiplication that is happening across the country. And that multiplication continues to happen. I keep beating this drum, and I will for the rest of forever, that it is in unifying. It's that spider web. I've talked about the spider web a lot of times. It's all the connecting pieces. As long as we're disjointed in little pockets everywhere, and I don't have anybody to talk to, I feel alone. I've talked to so many people out in California who feel isolated and like they're the
Mm.
only conservative there, surrounded by a sea of lefty communists. And by connecting, you guys, by finding a way to say, hey, I'm going to create a room where you can all find each other. This is what Marley's doing, in a kind of her way, in a very different way, around something very, very uh, poignant, these elections and this information that she has uncovered. And you were gifted an anointing for this, Marley. I mean, God put this on you. And I wonder if you would have thought all that you're going through right now, or what you've discovered, if it would have been so daunting and you would have been like, God, no, please. But he's been with you through the whole thing, right? And every day, I know we had this conversation earlier. We get up and we're excited about it because it's like it's inside of us and it's part of us, and we want to save this country. We want to save our kids. But so much of it is connecting with other people and not being disengaged and not going off and saying, I can't look at this right now. It's too much. I'm going to go live my life. No, we all have to get engaged and do this together, but there is support for everyone. You've just got to find your support, and we can do this together.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Every single person has, no one was overlooked, right? Creator didn't make any trash. Every single one of us has the ability and the gifts within us to contribute meaningfully. And America is full of geniuses. And
Yeah.
and that's again, that's why we're calling our organization United Sovereign Americans, because if you're a unique thinker and a beautiful person who loves this world and loves this creation more than anything, and you're willing to stand up for it, you belong.
Mhm.
You absolutely belong, and there's a
Amen.
role for you. and we're going to fix it together.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you go to auditny.com, first of all, there's a ton of resources there. You can read some of our reports. If you're looking at maybe arguing the work that you've already done more carefully, you can read over the New York 2020 deficits report, which is a great example of putting findings next to black letter law. Come to the Tuesday night meetings, contact us through the auditny.com website and get added to that mailing list and get added to that call. Click the volunteer button and put in your information until we have the United Sovereign American website up. That's the best way to get onboarded for either organization. So just don't hesitate to contact me and the amazing New York Citizens Audit team through that website. Because I tell you, there's tons of people there who are all fired up and ready to meet you, ready to give you a call and figure out how we're going to get you plugged in.